So the elephant in the room, coming off of the wild, crazy success of Concord, is whether or not PlayStation is going to change their approach to live service games. Because at the very least, whether you think Concord's a really good game, whether you think it's a really boring game, or you think it's bad, doesn't really matter. The effect and the conclusion you should reach is that something didn't work, right? Something did not work properly. Because if the game is even okay and everything else goes well, it should at least have a chance of success. But something didn't work here. And Sony's approach should be to figure out what that was. Now, I think it's a combination of many, many things. For one, just at the outset, I don't think anybody was particularly intrigued by the concept of the game. I think it looked kind of cringy to begin with. So people are already kind of like, eh. And then they found out they were going to have to pay $40 for it. Really not a fan of that. And then the narrative started building and building that nobody was playing it, nobody was interested. And once that narrative takes hold, your live service game is dead, because nobody's going to spend $40 to get into a game that they're not going to be able to play in a few weeks because the player count will be so low. Nobody's going to do that. So they're just going to sit on the sidelines, because why would they? Why would they throw $40 away effectively? So I think there were many, many things that stacked into Concord's demise, but now the question is, how does Sony handle their stuff moving forward? Because bear in mind, they have other live service games that are coming in the next few months, next year, next 2 years, that are actively in the works. Like, these are coming and they're going to be influenced by Concord, no doubt. So there's a lot of things to kind of stack into this. Money laundering. Is that the grand strategy? So I think Sony at this point should be looking at some of the competition, and they should be looking at games like Suicide Squad, which launched at 70, had narrative vignettes. Certainly they tried to sell it as being, it has the most cutscenes of any game we've ever made. I mean, granted, there's only 2 hours of gameplay, but and we repeat that for dozens of hours across the seasons, but still, whatever, shut up. But they should look at that and acknowledge that. Skull and Bones, also been memed on a lot. It's actually performing the best on Steam, at least, of any of these games. And it also is a huge game on console and on, huge is generous, but it's much bigger on console and the Ubisoft launcher. So they presumably have a lot of people actually playing Skull and Bones right now on a Friday morning, in the US, which is honestly pretty surprising. I did not think, if you rewound the clocks to November of last year, I would have thought that Skull and Bones would probably be the most dead of all of these games, but no, it's actually performing the best, which is really funny. Yeah, the quadruple A investments worked out, didn't they? And then on the flip side, other games like Deadlock, which isn't even announced yet it doesn't have a release date announced yet. It's not even a thing. They did reveal it technically. So they did do an early development reveal drop mini trailer kind of thing, as you can see here. But that's it. It was at 90,000 players while it was still unannounced. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But it's because you've had streamers that have played it and have fallen in love with it. Shroud, famously, he tweeted out, or didn't tweet it, it was on a stream. He said that he has no doubt that Deadlock is going to be the biggest game probably in the world within months of it launching. Because he's like, it's honestly that fun. It's just very, very good. Whether that ends up being true, I don't know. He's much more qualified to talk about these types of games than me. But at the very least, it shows you that it's not about marketing dollars. It's not about how you frame it. It's at the end of the day about the game. If the game is good and people enjoy the game, you'll get 100,000 people in there during closed access testing. Meanwhile, Concord, when they were doing marketed open betas, they couldn't pass 3,000. So you would hope that Sony would look at all this and try to learn from their mistakes. But I think a lot of people were assuming that Concord was going to be the game where they learn from the mistakes of other live service games like Suicide Squad and Skull and Bones, and we're going to try and approach this game entering into a competitive market, and they were going to make it free to play and try to approach it that way. But they just didn't. And I've gone back and forth on why they tried to do it. There's sort of the cynical approach, which is the $40 price point was just an attempt to get some quick cash because they knew that this was going to flop, basically. Because basically the options were, if this is when, you know, this is our timeline, they could release it free to play and then hope over time that paid cosmetics and stuff generate some good amounts of money. But it starts out very, very low. I mean, you basically aren't making any money. If anything, more realistically, it starts down here and then takes off because there's operational costs and all that. And if you factor in the cost of like development, then it certainly is much lower and it's more like this. So they could do that. That's usually how free-to-play games work. Instead, they tried to charge $40 a copy, which starts them a bit higher. But their hope is that with the cosmetics and everything, it can take off. Maybe at a more shallow rate because it's like people are less likely to spend $40 on it, but whatever. And they just decided to do this route. And some people are like, oh, they're just trying to get, you know, this gap made up because they don't think that this is going to happen. Like none of this on this side of the equation is going to happen because it's going to shut down. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. To me, though, I think the old adage, never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by incompetence. I think that holds true. And I think it's reflected by Sony's approach with a lot of other stuff, which is that they just approach things in the way that they always have, which is that they sell you a game at a certain price point, you buy it, and if you like it, you play a lot of it, and then they can maybe make some extra money. I just think that the executives are not that interested in doing the free-to-play model. They know what they're doing when it comes to selling premium games to people. At least they thought they did. And so they thought that that could carry it forward. But after Concord, it's pretty clear live service games in competitive markets, you cannot do that. It doesn't work. And that brings us to the elephant in the room over at Sony, which is a game that they saw a lot of potential in, coming from a studio called Haven. Haven is sort of an up-and-coming team. Notably, they have a lot of things, you know, lots of job postings and stuff, but they were purchased in March of 2022 by Sony. You can see in this press release, Sony Interactive Entertainment announced today that it has entered into an agreement to acquire Haven Entertainment Studios, also known as Haven Studios, a Montreal-based development studio formed by acclaimed developer Jade Raymond, founder of Ubisoft Toronto and Motive Studios, and one of the creative forces behind the blockbuster Assassin's Creed franchise. And this is true. There is a lot of talent here that they know what they're doing. They've made some of the biggest franchises in the world, which will make the reveal of what they're working on all the more baffling. But you can see, founded in March of 21 with an investment from Sony, Haven Studios is led by a premier team of game creators with over a decade of experience collaborating on some of the industry's most popular games and franchises. Haven Studios is currently working on its first project, a new live service experience for PlayStation built upon a systemic and evolving world focused on delivering freedom, thrill, and playfulness. Quote, Haven is an emerging studio with an exceptional team of talent, and we're delighted to welcome them into PlayStation as our first game development studio in Canada, said Jim Ryan. Jimmy, James, he's back. He's everywhere. The studio's focus on creating an original AAA multiplayer game will not only flex the power of the PlayStation 5, but will further expand upon the diverse catalog of gaming experiences that can only be found on PlayStation. So with Concord, they bought the studio after, again, they said that Concord took them 8 years. They bought that studio when Concord was very far along. They saw the game, thought it had a lot of potential, and then they bought it. With this game we're about to talk about from Haven Studios, the studio was founded thanks to money from Sony. They put cash up to form this studio, so they've been in since the very, very, very beginning. With Concord, they kind of had the get out of jail free card of like, oh, well, we didn't really make the game. We just like published it and, you know, we bought them. Yeah, but effectively we just published it. They made the game though. We didn't have that much direct involvement. With Fairgames, they've been involved since the studio was founded, which is interesting, especially when you see what it is. In this announcement, they say with a team of over 60 employees and growing, Haven Studios will be the 18th studio to join the PlayStation Studios family. The day-to-day operations post-acquisition will continue to be run by the management team at Haven Studios in close collaboration with the PlayStation Studios leadership team. Terms of this transaction, including the acquisition costs, are not disclosed due to contractual commitments. We don't know exactly how much they spent on it. It could be 100 million, could be 50 million, could be 200 million. We don't really know. And we haven't really seen many leaks as far as I'm aware of how much they spent on it, but they've spent a lot. So what is this game? What is this game that they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on and represents a major investment for them? It is surprising. As you can see, CGI, not actual gameplay. Bear in mind, the goal of this should be to make a unique live service game. And these guys are from Ubisoft, okay? So just ask yourself if this looks kind of Ubisofty.
You want to know about us? Seems like everyone does these days. It's simple. Too much money and too much power is held by just a few people. And it's only getting worse. So, we decided to do something about it. Let's go.
Designer socks too, I got the swag too. It's a haiku, I'm something like you. Might drink and drive too. Work 9 to 5s when I was in high school. These shoes here don't come out till June. This my pick, I'll crop you. Married to the game, set my I do's. Got a window seat like Erykah Badu.
Let's just say the reception was not great. This was revealed May of 23. And even back then, the reception was not great. Eat the Rich and the game is the most corpo vision ever. The irony of a live service game based on eating the rich is levels of irony I can't comprehend, and I'm fueled by it. What's even more baffling is that the odds are very high that they charge like $40 for this one as well. Because again, I don't think you need to attribute the, I don't think you need to explain the $40 price tag for Concord by saying, oh, it was just them trying to milk everybody because they knew it was going to flop. I think that the people that made that decision were just so full of themselves, they thought people would honestly buy it and then still engage with it a lot. I just think they're that out of touch. I really think that that's all you have to say. Thanks to all our players, but we're unfortunately ending support 1 year later vibes to it. Another Concord with the same fate. You can take the devs out of Ubisoft, you can't take the Ubisoft out of the devs. I'm almost 40, but even I am getting, how do you do, fellow kids, vibes. Eat the Rich creates a games as a service with seasonal battle pass and millions of microtransactions. Eat the Rich, gamers. Just ignore the fact that we showed our game in a mega corporation sizzle reel presented and pay us $70. $1 billion company makes a game about how rich people are bad. You sure want to go through with this after Concord, Sony? Concord just came out. You're next. The consumers keep you guys afloat. I'm yet to see a scenario where a gang of diverse high schoolers fighting the corporations is not cringe. I also can't think of an example of that. Again, I agree with Techno. There's nothing wrong with a diverse cast of characters. It's when your game can only be defined by a couple of taglines that are not particularly interesting to begin with. People kind of check out and are like, okay, but like, what about the game though? You know? So here's the deal with this. It's made by a very successful team of developers from Ubisoft. The vibe I get from this is very Watch Dogs. I mean, especially like this back here at the very end. If that doesn't look Watch Dogs to you, I don't know what will, but it seems very Watch Dogs inspired. They described it as having like an evolving world or whatever. My guess is that it's something where there's like multiple different mission types, and it's going to be something, I don't even know how to break this down. My guess is it's going to be something like this, okay? We're going to have a series of missions that can be taken on. Okay. So you imagine this is like the UI, and you have all of these missions you can take on. And each of these represents stealing from some billionaire. Okay. So maybe this is like, you know, the equivalent of Bezos. And then this is like the Musk one. This is the Ma fortune. And then like you just have somebody for each of these. These are all like made up billionaires. Okay. And then what they'll do is like each of them will have a payout associated with them. So maybe this one's payout is like 20 billion. And then this one is like 15. And then this one's 8 and 3 and 5 and 2 and 11 and 23. And so if everybody targets this one, then that goes down in value. And then the number 2 guy with 2 billion in wealth, he goes up, and this becomes 3 billion in wealth. And then this guy actually blows up a ton, and this goes up all the way to 13 billion. So then everybody leaves these missions and goes and takes on these missions to take this guy's money. And it's just going to be that cycle of like an evolving list of missions, basically just where they're like the wealth is being transferred around, and then you steal it. Because as we all know, theft is moral if they have more than you. So I really don't expect this to be like that novel or crazy. I expect it to basically be a heist-based shooter, and that's about the extent of it. And it might be solid. There might be some decent gameplay systems and stuff. But again, what have I said so many times? One of the most potent forces in all of gaming is peer pressure. And if a game is deemed uncool, there's very little you can do to shake that. And very few people will want to engage with it. And I'll tell you what, this has from the very, very outset, a lot of those very cringy vibes to it, where you can tell it's developed by 56-year-old dudes who are trying to appeal to what they think like the young people will find slays. And it just doesn't, I really just don't think it's gonna click. So this is sort of the elephant in the room. After Concord, I think they are all, like everybody is walking on eggshells. I think everybody is probably wondering what they're going to do here. Like, is this going to be a $40 price point as well? Are they going to still release this? Joe Raptor on the podcast on Wednesday, he was saying he wouldn't be surprised if they just cancel this, if they just can it, because the odds of this popping off are also pretty low, I would say. Especially if it was getting torn apart pre-Concord, post-Concord, I think there's a lot, not even of skepticism in the audience. I think there's a lot of cynicism and pessimism. And I think a lot of people are rooting for all of these Jim Ryan projects to collapse. And so this is, I would argue this one has an even steeper uphill climb than Concord. Like, it's a more unique game from what I can tell. It's not as easy to just be like, oh, it's an Overwatch clone. It seems, at least from this trailer and from the announcement of the acquisition, it seems to be more unique. But I think that what it makes up for in originality, it probably loses in cringe factor, be my expectation. It's kind of like Payday. Yeah, you could probably compare it to Payday. So my guess is I don't think they cancel this. I think they see this through, because I am still convinced that I think Sony is, you see it from the devs, you see it from some people on X/Twitter. I still don't think they really get why Concord failed, because I think it's really easy to just hand wave it away and be like, oh, a bunch of bigots didn't like the character design, and so that's why it failed, which I don't think is why it failed. I think it failed. You can explain the failure of Concord very easily with a lot of other aspects, lack of originality, the $40 price point, the low player counts that reinforce the low player count because nobody wants to buy into a dying game. I just think there's many reasons why Concord failed. And if they're just going to justify it and explain it away with something like that, it's just going to be like Disney with Star Wars stuff. Oh, you didn't like the Acolyte? Well, that's just because you're a piece of crap. Instead of actually acknowledging, maybe the writing actually wasn't that good. Maybe it's a concept we didn't really need to explore. They never ask those questions because they can just hand wave it away with an easier excuse to make. And I get the feeling that Sony is still making those same mistakes and that things haven't really shifted or changed for them in any noticeable way. So I expect we still see this. I expect we might even see this in a week or two, or a few weeks. I forget when they said the next showcase is happening. Not showcase, state of play. Sony is going to be doing a state of play to reveal the PlayStation 5 here in September. And when they do that, I think they're going to reveal like Death Stranding 2 running on the PS5 Pro. I think they'll show stuff like that. But I think they're also going to have a trailer for Fairgames. And I think that's why it's a state of play and not a showcase, because I think they know if they were to do that, it would probably not go over too well. But having said that, I think I think this doesn't go well. And if it ends up playing basically just like Watch Dogs, but it's a live service game, I really don't think that goes over well. Do you think Concord's failure would change their approach to everything in the future? No, I think that we've seen, like, Concord's problems were readily apparent months ago. After those open betas that only got 3,000 players, that should have been, okay, this is not going to work. If they were actually critically evaluating everything, they would have either like delayed it at that point, made it free to play, like, and relaunched the betas 6 months later. Like, they should have done that if they were actually critically evaluating all of this. The fact that they didn't do that shows that either the people in upper levels of Sony management just don't really care about that stuff, and they're like, no, just put it out. Or they're just like done with it and they just want to get this stuff out and move on. Or they're so cocky that they think that they can get away with it. And they might look at it that way. They might be like, well, Helldivers popped off, so we'll try again with Fairgames. Concord just, it was attacked by a lot of mean YouTubers. So that's why. That's the only reason, But having said this is the elephant in the room. Everybody's watching it. Everybody's like, what are they going to do? Because I don't think anybody thinks this is going to become the next big thing. I don't think people are going to be dropping, Payday and Rainbow and Fortnite and all these other games to go and play this. And that's just based on a vibe from a cinematic CGI trailer, which, to be clear and to be totally fair, not very indicative. You can't take a whole lot from that. But I just think as a concept, it's one that's not that interesting. They have a lot of things they show in the trailer, like the ability to grapple onto these different objects. You can see them using it to grapple onto the truck and swing up. So presumably there's going to be some actual traversal with that, where you can use it to climb fences or up buildings and stuff. You can see here it's used to grab a robo attack dog. Here they use it to grab panels of like mirrors to reflect the lasers back off. Here you'll see him using it to grab onto like a tabletop, a countertop, whatever, to use as a shield right here. So it seems like there are some interesting dynamics in terms of gameplay, but is that enough to shake the cringe factor? I honestly don't know. But again, this is a game that Sony's been involved in from the very, very beginning. And it always just frustrates me because I'm like, okay, you have some cool gameplay systems. Interesting. Love that. Why did we have to go with like the most cringe corpo? We're relatable. We're just like you. We hate the rich. Meanwhile, we spent $200 million on this game and we talked about this launch with the executive team on a retreat to Maui that we all flew our private corporate jets to. And it's just like, I don't know if they just think, I think it really reveals how little they think of you as a gamer. Like, they really do think that you're going to be like, oh, yeah, eat the rich. Yeah, I play a game where I beat up the rich people because rich people stupid. And they really think that, like, you're not going to realize who the game is coming from and, like, you're just going to go along with it. It's just dumb. But we'll keep an eye on it. I have a feeling we'll find out more in a couple weeks. There is the potential that they delay that reveal. If we don't see Fairgames next, like at the next PlayStation event, I think the odds are pretty high that they're maybe doing some serious introspection after Concord. So I think that would be a good sign. Weirdly enough, if we don't see it, I think that's a good sign for it. But if we do see it, I think it's going to go exactly how you would expect it to go. He took my thing.